episode of The Modern Nerd. I am Sir Slice.
I'm Smerchandise.
And I'm GJC.
And we are, as always, massive nerds. Now we're coming to you today with our second episode of Fallout. We're going to talk about the last 4 episodes, really more so overarching the characters and the story. And I know last week, anyone who listened, I mentioned we were going to have a special guest. That will be a separate episode. We're just kind of working on some scheduling here, and then we'll have that taken care of. But before we get into this, I want to give a good shout out here to my fellow gentlemen on either side of me, Smirch and GJC. Thank you as always for doing this. And anybody watching us live, thank you for joining us here today. And if you're catching us on YouTube or wherever this may be playing, thank you for watching. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you can see more of our content in the future. But that being said, given George made all of this stuff for our outline, I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton over to you, my good sir.
So, just like last time, we're just going to dive into it. No synopsis. We're assuming you are good kids. You did your homework. We're doing episodes 5 to 8. Sorry, I wrote that wrong on the title. But it's 5 to 8, so it's the last 4 episodes.
Doing 4 again.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the last 4 episodes, or 3 episodes, I guess. Last 3 episodes, 4 episodes.
No,
6, 7, 8.
6, 7, 8. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, 6, 7, 8. So it's the last 4 episodes. Is it 5? I don't know how to count.
4, 5. It's 5,
4,
6,
5,
7, and 8.
7.
4, 5, 6, 7. So 4 episodes. You can cut that all out if you want, but
Cut this whole thing out.
well, the whole thing is like, I mean, I try to watch one episode.
I made it worse.
I literally just watched the rest of it together after
5,
I started.
6, 7, 8. I can count.
It all bleeds together to me.
4 episodes.
But anyways,
Okay.
we essentially leave off with Maximus and Maximus' story, kind of, and also Lucy's story. They immediately kind of intertwine after they left off. So we're gonna kind of break off the characters and the storylines into 2 parts because we kind of feel like these characters' stories complement each other, and also they're more entangled. So Maximus and Lucy will kind of be discussing together, sort of. So keep that in mind as we go through the podcast. Right now we have where we left Maximus is him and his new squire Thaddeus essentially to retrieve the head that they're all searching for from the Gulper, and they're celebrating, and that's what's happened. So in case you kind of need to know where it is in the story. So diving right into it about what we've seen for the rest of the series or the rest of the season, do you think that Maximus will forgive Lucy for leaving him? And we talked about this a little bit before from Dan's kind of character analysis of Maximus last time, is that Dan sort of thought that perhaps we were seeing the rise of a villain and this villain's journey, kind of, as opposed to the hero's journey that we're so used to in a lot of stories. But he kind of felt like this was a villain's origin story. And some of the questions, I guess, that goes with Maximus' character is, where is he now as the season ends, in kind of the moral scale of, is he gray? Is he more of a good guy? Is he more of a bad guy? And what are some of your reasons for it? So, Dan, would you like to discuss your thoughts, I guess, on Maximus?
Before that, so for clarification, when you say forgive Lucy for leaving him, you mean in that last episode?
In that last episode, good point, Slice. In that last episode, we see Maximus leave Lucy, or Lucy leave Maximus after the ghoul shows up and they go searching for Lucy's dad. So that's where the season ends for Lucy, kind of, is that he and the ghoul now are searching for, after finding Lucy's dad, they go searching for Lucy's dad, who runs away. So when I ask, do you believe that Maximus will forgive Lucy, that's what I'm saying, because he wakes up and Lucy's not around.
Got it. All right.
So when I talked about Maximus last time, I proposed to everyone that the whole boot or foot in the razor bladed boot was kind of a metaphor for questioning his morality. I have continued to do so personally. I don't think that's what in the second half of this show viewing, I'll talk a little bit more about that boot later, but I think we've just been seeing a bad guy just kind of play out a hero's journey. I don't think if Lucy was there, he would have done anything good. And I think like something he has in common with most bad guys is that what he thinks he's doing is always right. He thinks he has a great sense of morality and that the greater good comes first. Another typical bad guy thing. If Lucy wasn't there, look what happened when Lucy wasn't there. You know, he's just like, well, I have to kill you now, Thaddeus. Like, if there was no questioning of anything else that he could have done. When Thaddeus found out that he wasn't Titus, it was just like, oh, well, too bad. I have to kill you now. Like, there was no other alternative. That is a very, like, only cis deal in absolutes. I think he has a good story, but I do think now that Lucy has left him, I don't think he'll forgive her. And I think that even though he did try to own up to the fact that he wasn't the one that killed Moldaver at the very end, which makes me question just a little bit everything what I've been saying. That removed, I feel like that was the last little bit of good leaving his body, and he's now just gonna do. He's in the Brotherhood, and he's gonna do what he thinks he needs to do.
All right. I think for me, I kind of agree with Dan in the sense that, like, it seemed like after he returned to the Brotherhood, he was made a, like, okay, so you like, last time I talked about how everything he does, I question his motives. I always think they're self-serving in the name of like righteousness or whatever self-righteousness you can say in the Brotherhood, you know, and his thoughts behind that. So just like Dan, he can justify a lot of things with that. But I kind of always say that it's even more basic than that. It's just more selfishness. So like, he tried to kill his squire after finding out the truth. You know, he makes this decision to, again, when he meets Thaddeus, to seemingly let him escape, like, and be like, hey, I'm going to do you solid because if they find out you're a ghoul, they're going to fucking kill you. But was that really for Thaddeus, or was that so that no one would question his story? Was that more for his own selfish means of, like, eventually maybe reuniting or finding a way back to Lucy? Was he doing it out of selflessness and looking out for Thaddeus? This is the same guy he tried to kill a while ago, who left him in the suit. So what may have looked like an altruistic, nice thing that he did in front of Lucy especially, it was ultimately a selfish thing, because now there's no one to confirm it or deny his story, whatever he tells the Brotherhood. You know? Yeah. And he made, like, he was offered the deal. He was offered the deal by the High Cleric, which was, like, rule this Brotherhood with me. Like, this new generation of people that I have working under me, I don't like them. And I think you're somebody who sees the world in the same way I do, and I see great things for you. I want you to lead the Brotherhood with me. And that last scene is like, I kind of agree with Dan, like, accepting that choice. I think he now is in his mind that Lucy loves me. She'll forgive me for whatever I do to get back to her, because she says we'll see each other again. So I'm going to do whatever I can to get back to her. If that means having to take over the Brotherhood, if that means having to do some atrocious fucking things in the name of getting back to Lucy, she's going to forgive me.
You know, the more I think about this question, the more I'm still in the morally gray area with him. I don't think he's a villain. I don't think he's an outright villain. I think it's a little bit of both of what you guys are saying, in a sense. I do think that a lot of his actions have been for self-preservation, just wanting to stay alive and get on to the next day and the next moment and move on. Like, you can definitely see, though, some of what Dan's talking about more over in the earlier episodes, where he, like, when he lets the knight die, that seemed a little more cold-hearted, a little bit more cold-blooded, a little more, well, fuck you, I'm just gonna watch you die, because, you know, it's not so much about him. Like, that situation could have played out where everybody lives and everything's fine, but that was more of him taking power. And wanting to covet the knight's armor. But then later now we're seeing, you know, especially he's coming clean with Lucy, telling her about everything, mostly because he, you know, is in love with her, or believes he is in some regard. Not that any of these people really know what love is or a real relationship is about. And I think that, you know, he's going to play out a little differently. I think for me, there's more of a, they could write this in any direction and still make it work. they could turn him a little bit more good, and it would be completely believable. There is an out for him to be good, and there's an out for him to be evil. I can see this playing out in either way. And just from my perspective, I don't think I'm kind of like, I don't see it in one road or the other. I see it kind of, we're still in that middle road, and we haven't quite hit that fork in the road yet for me to know if he's into, all good or all bad. So it's very interesting, especially because he is trying to get back to Lucy, and he is trying to, you see him try and be like, no, I didn't do this. This wasn't me. I didn't, win over the didn't kill Moldaver. And then I'm like, oh, but he's still gonna take that position of power, and like absolute power corrupts absolutely. So it's interesting, and I am excited to see more of him. Will he forgive Lucy? Depending on which path he takes, maybe. I think yes, he will, but he will do it. Damn it, now I'm leaning villain. He'll do it in that like, oh, come rule with me kind of thing, where, he'll forgive her, but he'll do it because he wants her to be a part of his grand plan. I don't know. It depends on how convincing her final speech is in that moment, because she's going to give one, because her character is the speech giver, and all that, trying to convince others. So we'll see kind of what happens there. That's why I'm like super invested in his story, because it really could go either way, and I would not be mad at any. It just depends on how dynamic they want to make these moments. So we'll see.
I think he'll forgive her if she agrees completely with his idea.
Yeah, maybe.
Like what he will do. If she doesn't, then I don't.
Because
it's like, well,
it depends on how many other
you're against me type of person.
He's going to have to do a lot to get back to her, I feel. Like a lot. It's not going to be a straight path.
Other archetypes they've made or introduced into the show that will already fit that bill. If they already have somebody who's going to fit that archetype, or a new person who fits that archetype, they may not write him that way. You know what I mean? Because you can't have too many characters of the same design and then it becomes stale and boring. I don't know. Yes, I agree with you that that's definitely a big ending spot that I can see happening. Damn,
he reminds me of Guy Speltar.
Very solid. Yeah. Not as extreme, but yes.
At least in the beginning, where you're like, well, okay, this guy
is charismatic.
Not I guess, Guy Speltar, who can compete with that. No. So I think this show is great because of the way it contrasts characters and putting them together. Lucy with the ghoul, and now we get a chance to see the ghoul, like Lucy with Maximus, because they spend some time together. And one of the things that happens is they, after Lucy drops off some chems for Cooper outside the Super Duper Mart, she runs into Maximus, who's trapped inside his suit, and she saves him. And they also stumble into some wastelanders and get shot at, and he ends up getting hurt. So they're looking for a place to fix him up, and they get trapped inside a vault 4. And she's like, hallelujah. This is like, they wake up and they're like, this is the best. She's like, this is the best place on earth. You're safe now. And she has like this idea of like how idealistic it is to be in the vault. But immediately when she's confronted by her assumptions of what a vault should look like and be like, she comes off as, at least to me, as like very bigoted and very judgmental, and very like almost immediately does a 180. She's like, whoa. Like, as first she starts off as being not suspicious because she just assumes these things are the same in every vault. But as soon as she's kind of starts seeing things that are slightly different than the vault that she grew up in, she jumps to a very like 180 almost, as opposed to Maximus, who is very suspicious, but like as soon as he gets a little bit of comfort life in the vault, he's like, this is the greatest place on earth, So I want to compare the two and say, do you feel like we as watchers feel a little bit more forgiving of the bigotries and assumptions and the stereotypes that like Lucy is going into the vault with? Because she like is just like, this guy's got one eye. She like almost does that Austin Powers thing where she's like mole, like like she's just staring right at his eye, like, and looking and being like, "Are you fucking seeing this? Is this fucking like? Can I like like the whole time?" And we somehow find it comedic. We find it charming. We are more forgiving. And do you think, Tim? Starting off with you, do you think because are we more forgiving for her? Why is it that we feel that way? Kind of discuss her character.
It for me, I didn't even think about it when I was watching until I was kind of asked this question, and it did kind of spark some more thought in my head. But I don't think that she is bigoted in that sense, because one, if you can look at like all of the rest of her interactions with people on the surface, she's given a lot of people the benefit of the doubt throughout, and you're like, she's tried to start a conversation like everybody will understand what she's talking about and where she comes from, because she is legitimately the definition of sheltered. She lives in a fallout shelter, a bunker, and knows literally nothing of anything outside of these walls. I mean, what they said at maximum, like 200 people could be living in this vault, and like, yes, there's 2 other vaults next to her, but they don't interact. So that's, so she knows what she knows, and I can 100% forgive her for thinking that every vault is the same, because that's kind of what she's been raised on, is that, oh, vaults, plural. It's always been plural. So then you would assume that the rest of them are all going to be just like this, fun and happy, and let's all not have any sort of arguments, and let's just be grand and yippee, and like, you want to go have sex? Okie dokie. Like, that's her
okie
phrase.
dokie.
Her catchphrase
Right.
is okie dokie. That alone should show you how naive she is. Which I do love to go back like a bunch of episodes when she was like cutting off the head of the guy that she brought the catchphrase, just like okie dokie, like so worn out, and decided to do it anyway. So yeah, I don't think she would necessarily be bigoted. She did kind of go a little off when she thought that they were all super evil and everything, and from everything she discovers and finds out, like, even to me, it's like, oh, don't go to level 12. My immediate thought is, what the fuck is on level 12? Like, I'm gonna go there, so understandable that she gets like really like, what are you doing to these people, and blah, blah, blah. And then we get to see a lot of like the history of like what happened with that vault that we find out was part of Coop's story as well. We can kind of circle back to that later, but yeah, I think it's again just more growth on her part, because her opinions change afterwards, and if she was truly bigoted, they would never change, and she would continue to think the same way she does, because that's what bigotry is based on, basically, is unchanging people's point of view. So yes, I don't think she's bigoted, to go on a long story short.
Yeah, I don't. It's an interesting question, but I think in this instance, yeah, I'm pretty forgiving, because she could barely, up until that point, understand the concept. She hadn't even experienced it, or let alone practice any sort of bigotry herself. I think she learned a lot that day, but I also think that like Lucy is the main character of the show, and we as an audience are experiencing this world for the first time with Lucy, and because we essentially, if you break it down, we all more or less come from a privileged life. We can all go to a grocery store, get food, and don't have to worry about being murdered on the way. So we are seeing this show through Lucy's eyes, and probably experiencing it and reacting to it the same way that she would. I don't think there is a single person among us that would see a person with one eye and go, oh, like, so I think that there's nothing, those were probably some of the nicest people she's come across. And I think she learned something that day.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's a valuable lesson. And like I said, I think it's very good that like you get to see Maximus and Lucy kind of react to the vault very differently. It's just another layer to the story. And I absolutely love the backstory of like kind of seeing the cults that have formed after Shady Sands and like what's more backstory. So I really love the way they told the story of that vault. kind of an on purpose swerve though, you know, like you can kind of see it. They're like, oh, we were setting you up like the whole time, didn't let you think it was really scary, but and totally understandable why Lucy was freaking out because that's some scary shit she saw. Finally, we're gonna kind of get to
can I give a point to Dan's theory though? Because during that episode, you see when they leave at the end of that episode or mid whatever, Titus Maximus takes the core from their bunker and uses it to power his suit, which is like you know what I mean? Like he sees something bad happening and jumps to action. He sees something bad happening to her and jumps to action. So it's kind of plays into Dan's point, but then he wants to keep it. And Lucy, having learned something, was like, oh no, we got to give it back. It's the right thing to do, which, you know, foreshadowing when she says, you know, oh, if my dad knew that I let an entire city or little civilization burn just to get to him, he would be saddened. And I was like, oh man, never would have picked up on that. But Titus at the time wanted to keep it. And it wasn't until she said to give it back that he would have. So self-preservation again, put that up for Maximus and Dan right there. Okay, moving on.
Good point. So I felt like Norm and Cooper stories were more about kind of propelling the plot and the backstory of they're kind of like both sides of the opposite sides of the same story, right? You get to see what happened with Vault-Tec's planning before the bombs fell, and then Norm is with Cooper, I mean, and then with Norm, you get to see what was the result of those plans, you know, as you learn to find out that Vault 31, 32, and 33 were part of a grand plan cooked up by one of Cooper's wife's coworkers, Bud, to essentially seed these two other vaults outside of 31 and fill them up with vault dwellers that were slowly implanted with people who were frozen all these years. So that was like, we find out the backstory of Lucy's dad and where he came from as well, that he worked for Cooper's wife, which is like a really big deal. So we do discover all this background about Cooper and Vault-Tec. And we find out that almost immediately that Cooper recognizes Moldiver as somebody else. He's captured earlier on in the first these 4 episodes by some local government. Government, I don't know, they totally misspelled government, but and they bring him in, and he sees a wanted poster for her, and he's like, "Who is this lady?" And they're like, "That's Moldiver," and he's like, "Well, that ain't who I know her as." And it turns out he's known her since before the Great War, and since before the bombs fell, actually. So that's a very interesting part of the story.
Do they ever say her name?
They don't ever say her name in the pre-war era.
And do we? Sorry to sidetrack this real quick. What year is the pre?
2077.
2077.
We're in like 2090 something now.
Well, it would be 22 something now.
22, yeah, in the 90s.
Okay, all right, thank you. I couldn't remember, so go on.
Yeah, so we don't even know her real name, but it turns out she's essentially a scientist who almost created Cold Fusion. And shout out to the Saint. That's the same thing that happened in the Saint. But she invented Cold Fusion, and it was stopped and bought up by Vault-Tec and other businesses to stop her from doing her research. And she convinces Coop to spy on his wife. He learns out all these things that she's planning with like all these mega corporations like Robco and Repcon and Big Mountain, and he overhears this like secret meeting. And so my question is after finding out all this stuff and seeing all this stuff that Coop is kind of like discovered, do you think that he's really bought into what Moldiver is saying? Is he still suspicious? Where is he on that scale? And then also, is Cooper a good guy now, or do we feel that he's like, now that we know more about him, that he's actually still kind of a bad guy?
Who do you want?
I'll go first. Yeah.
Okay.
I think now his motivation personally is more, we find out his motivation is like, I'm going to go and like find my wife and family. That's what he ends up after confronting Hank. That's the question he asks, right? Is that like, I'm more interested in discovering Hank and like discovering where my wife and family is, and that seems to be the new direction that he's going for. And I suspect that like maybe before the bombs fell, he had already turned on his wife and he had already like had a falling out, right? And now his goal is not so much of like this warm fuzzy feeling of wanting to reunite with my family, but I feel like maybe it's more about like finding his kid, because he's with his child like when the bombs fell. So something must have happened between, you know what I'm saying? There's a missing piece we're still missing that I don't know if like maybe he's been this good guy all along. His goal has really always been to find his kid, you know, and the wasteland has turned him into a bad guy, I guess. Tim, what did you think?
I mean, I wouldn't call him a bad guy. He's an anti-hero. He's someone who has been shaped by the fallout of this war. And so you kind of see what he does, what he has to do to survive the wastelands. Obviously, he's a ghoul, so he's got to make sure that he's making money to then get his serum so that he doesn't go feral and rabid or whatever it is. But I feel like he's going to be more the type who, yes, he's always going to kind of be looking for his family, and everything that we've seen him do is basically a side mission to stay alive long enough to find his family, which we find out really at the last 15 minutes of episode 8 that he's still looking for them, which is like big plot twist, big setup for season 2. Excited for that, and more of the history there and everything. But I feel like he definitely I agree with you. I feel like he turned on his wife, at least in some regard, that he believes Moldaver, and that he's now seen that like everything that he's done, because he's a veteran of the war that they're talking about before, you know, the fallout and everything like that. So there was a war even pre 2077 that he fought in, and is now kind of, you know, it was a whole big thing as to why he's taking on all of the Vault-Tec stuff and yada yada yada. So it's his is the most interesting story, kind of, for me, for the most part, until we learned about you know, that his story and Lucy's father's story overlap, and now that they've kind of met, those stories are now going to be kind of told side by side, or together, as opposed to next to each other. So I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he's going to do what he needs to do. I think he can have some questionably moral stuff, but that makes it more interesting to me when you have intriguing characters, as opposed to like, I'm good, I'm bad, fuck you, no you, all right, we're dead. So, you know, yes, it's a trope that's been played a billion times over and over, but I like the way he's doing it. I like his voice, you know. So I'm all for finding out more of why he's looking for his kid, or his family, quote unquote,
yeah,
probably kid,
probably, right?
You know, to like at least say, you know, like tell off his wife or kill her. I don't fucking know, something like that. We'll find out, hopefully.
Interesting. I don't have too much to say. It really did feel like I was intrigued with the story, and we got a pretty good sense of who he was before everything happens. And you know, we saw him be sweet with his daughter. You know, which at that point, at that birthday party, clearly had been separated from his wife. I think at that point.
Yeah, maybe.
So it seems like some stuff went down. In the second half of the show, it felt like more of just driving the plot forward and finding out and uncovering what exactly happened, and less about learning what he is like as a character. And that's okay. I look forward to learning more about him. I hope we do, because you know, the actor's extremely charismatic and he's very good. And he does still falling into a bunch of tropes, you know, here and there, but it's, you know, there's a lot of story to get through, especially in the second half of this, and that's okay. But yeah, that's all I have to say, really. Tim, you had a thought?
I did. So you mentioned that they like kind of had, you know, it seemed as though they were divorced by the time the bomb fell at that birthday party. Like, what if, and this kind of, man, I'm going to say it now because we could talk about it later in the predictions part, but I'll forget. What if he was going to give his kid to his wife, made her promise that he would get her back after they were in the vault and everybody was safe? And then she went back on her word and he was left outside of the vault and she took the kid. And then now he's going to try and get vengeance on that. Like, what if that's kind of what happened? That's
I kind of feel like that could totally fit. Yeah, it's similar to what I was thinking. That's
my puzzle piece for the moment.
There's a big piece of the story we're still missing because what we see of the last moments with him, he's with his kid, but his wife isn't there, like leads a lot of questions as to what happened even immediately. Now we get, even though we get so many more pieces of what's happened and led up to that, we're still missing what happens immediately after the bombs fell and what happens immediately before the bombs fell. And that makes the story, I think, that much more intriguing, right? There's still so many pieces still missing. So I can't wait to find out more. Yeah, it's really fun to see it. And flashbacks don't always work, but I think with his character, because it works really well, kind of.
Super well.
And then we kind of talk about Norm. Norm was like, last we see Norm, he's on the other side of the story. He discovers that the Pip-Boy was used to, his mom's Pip-Boy was used to open the vault doors to let those raiders in. And throughout the whole time that Norm is kind of discovering this, he bounces his ideas and discoveries off of his cousin Chet, who I assume is from his mother's side, because we find out Hank is from Vault 31 in the past. So Norm is faced at the end of their story with now moving to a new vault with Steph, and he chooses to completely forget about this whole thing. You know, he's like, I just want to move on. Like, I don't want to remember what I saw in that other vault. I just think this is a nice way for us all to get a fresh start. I have a new child to raise with Steph, even though he's not mine. We're going to start a family together. Like, and Norm is like, you're a coward. Norm calls Chet out and says, dude, you're a coward. Like, my dad died. Like, people are like, this, like, bad things happened and things might happen again. And you're just choosing not to do it. So do you think it's right for Chet to, like, be labeled a coward by Norm? Is it right for him to judge Chet a coward?
Do you remember what Chet said in response to that?
What did he say to him?
So he goes, you're a coward. Norm says, you're a coward, Chet. And Chet goes, we all are. We live in a vault.
Yeah, it's a really good point. That's what I really stuck with me.
Hid and ran away from the end of the world because they're all cowards or rich, but cowards.
Does that make them cowards?
Yeah, and I say
I agree with Chet.
I say, like, Chet is doing, like, you can only react to the, like, and make the best situation, like, best decision on the situation you're in, right? So under the circumstances, he's doing what he thinks is vital for his survival, and that's to, like, forget about this thing, you know? Just like the ghoul, when he was living on the surface for 200 years, did whatever he had to do to survive, and we don't judge him for it, really. So how is Chet any more of a coward than anybody who's on the surface doing whatever it is they need to survive? He's just choosing the best way for him to move on and survive, and that's to forget about it. So I think
it just looks like a horrible way to move on. If he's
it really is, but you know,
he's the most
I can't judge him for doing that.
Just,
I can't judge him for moving. I don't, you know, you're totally right. Maybe they're all cowards. So Tim?
Yeah. No, Dan, I said my piece, really.
I mean, first of all, anytime anyone in any movie or show calls someone a coward, the person who said that just wants that person to think what they're thinking or do what they want to do. It's almost always a coercion or manipulation tactic, whether or not it's true or not. And that's, I mean, in my opinion, that example holds true here. Norm was just mad that Chet decided to take his ball and go home and wanted to live out a peaceful life. Don't you want to know the truth? Maybe he does a little. He'd rather just stay in his shell where it feels safe and warm. You can take hot showers and chill in your bathrobe and eat popcorn and watch TV. I mean, sounds pretty good to me. I mean, Maximus got a taste of it and he almost got full on indoctrinated. Is there anything right or wrong with what Chet's doing? Not necessarily. Is there anything right or wrong with the way that Norm's doing? No. They just both have different goals. And Norm is much more personally tied to this whole thing because of his dad. I think if Chet's dad was mixed up in all this, he might be a little more motivated, but he's not. Norm is on the path to find out what the hell's going on. He wants to know what happened to his mom, and he wants to know the truth, and that's enough for him. I do think that much like Maximus, and doing things that Maximus perceives to be right or for the greater good, and using that driving force to do whatever he needs to do, I think we haven't seen Norm really got to spread his wings yet. I think he's still a bit much like Cooper. He kind of is a little bit of a vessel for moving the plot forward. But I do think that Norm is like Maximus in that instead of using like altruism as his driving force, he's using like the quest for knowledge as his driving force to do whatever he needs to do to figure out what happens, it's what's happening, and to what he will do with that remains to be seen. But I think Norm just screams Enclave to me. The quest and keeping of knowledge and being in charge and power yet. He hasn't had a taste of it yet, but I think once he does, I like to think that that's where he's headed. I think he's got an interesting story so far.
Yeah, I love where you're talking about that, like where you're taking that, because we do know that like after they do like a group meetings, one of the engineers comes in and says like, "Oh, the water chip is broken, like, and we need to fix it, but we don't have any parts and we can't remake it. We need to get a new one." And
what happened with that, by the way?
Nothing.
Nothing, because that's okay. So for those of you, spoiler alert, but for those of you who haven't played any of the earlier Fallouts, that's one of the plots of the earlier Fallout, is that your water chip in your vault is broken and you were sent out into the wasteland to retrieve another one, and that's how you leave the vault. That's the quest. So
is it really?
Yeah, irony of ironies, their water chip is broken. So Dan, you're right.
Nice
like
he
might have his chance to spread his wings to find out the question, because Norm is left essentially with being stuck in Vault 31 with all the frozen tanks and Bud, and Bud's like, "You better crawl into your dad's cryo unit, or else you're gonna die here. There's no way to get back," which is like, we come on, we know that's like, yeah, okay, that's not how this story ends for him, but I kind of suspect that Norm will get his chance there, that maybe he can negotiate with Betty and be like, "Listen, like, you don't want me around. I want to find out what happened to my dad and Lucy, and send me out there, and I'll bring back a water chip for everyone. Like, that's the deal. And, you don't ever have to let me back in, but let me live right now, and I promise I'll come back with it, because I don't want to see my cousin and everyone die." So I think he'll have his chance.
I hope so.
I have one quick thing on Norm. Sure. I think after hearing this, Norm's the coward. Norm, if you look at it, and this might be me being a little bit harsh on him, but he has done nothing to try and right this wrong. He has seen and gathered, but he has done nothing. He knows that there was a problem in Vault 32, and that it was not what he says it is. He did nothing. He, knows that he suspected all of these problems, but did nothing when, he was confronted by Betty, when he was confronted by anybody. I mean, yes, there's moments where it seems like he's the smartest guy in the room for a moment, but then he gets one-upped real quick by Betty, and you're like, all right, well, maybe he's not. It just got lucky in a few of these points.
Kill the Raiders?
That's a great question too. Who do you think killed the Raiders? I think it's Steph or Betty.
Steph.
Yeah, I think it's Steph or 100%.
Steph. And they're pinning it on that other chick to make it look like 31 is clean.
Yeah.
When because what's the phrase? When nothing's getting done, vote.
When things look glum, vote 31.
So I think. And like, again, to my point is like, I kind of expected him to finally take some action at the end there when he's confronted with all these tubes of people. I was like, oh, all right. He's like, oh, you're getting locked in. Maybe I'm just not a great person, but my exact thought was like, oh, I'm getting locked in. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and, just terminate all these pods if you don't let me out. Like, and then he opens the door and just terminate the pods anyway. Like, you can put an end to everything right there. on that spot. The entire whole thing. I'm sure there's a kill switch because it's a fucking TV show and they always build a kill switch into
they
their
just
fucking
cracks
terminals.
open every pod.
Yeah, and then suddenly it's all over. And, like that would have been a great moment for him to have a spine. But did he? Nope. He looked like he was going to cry. And again, you're right. He's not a fully fleshed out character yet. Maybe we'll get a little bit more of that later, because right now in this last 3 episodes, whatever, he's more of a reaction piece, not even a plot device. He's supposed to be our reaction when we see his face. Whenever he sees all this stuff going on, it's like that's what we're supposed to feel, but we don't, because who the hell is Norm and why should I care about him? But
he did hide in the beginning too when the Raiders were attacking the
coward.
vault. And he admitted that. He was like, I did nothing. I hid in the closet. Yeah, he's projecting. You're totally right.
Yeah. So, because that's what a lot of people do when they're faced with their own morality or mortality, is they project and try and turn it into somebody else so they don't feel as shitty, knowing that they could have done something and didn't, or knowing that they let all this happen. Yeah. Sorry. That was
problem.
A fun
That's
little
great.
observation.
Yeah. Final thoughts. Fun Easter eggs and moments you like, guys.
Damn fine show. Damn fine storytelling. I think it all comes together. I don't have a ton of Easter eggs, so I'm taking over the final thoughts because I didn't play any of these games. I did say a while ago that I didn't know what a Deathclaw was. I can say that I did, I'll let Dan talk about it, but I'm like, oh no, wait, I do know what that character looked like. So, yeah, I don't know. I love this show. I really like the way they put it together. I think a good use of flashbacks, because again, George said earlier, they can be not great. But they worked out very well here. I wish they did it in some other shows better. Avatar. Anyway, predictions. I'll get to that after. That was my thought on the show. What do you want to go ahead? I'll come in again later.
All right, so we'll do Easter eggs last then.
You can go however you want.
So I mean, the show, God, it was great. So besides Lucy, who we constantly see the show through her eyes, in my opinion, the morality of everyone is so gray, because the environment of this show changes everyone. War never changes. What someone could go somewhere to a different area of this, in this land of Fallout, and they could be one person, a shitty person one moment, and be a completely maybe they have a wake up call and they'd be a good person the next. I think that's really what I don't know how things would play out if this kind of thing were to happen, but I keep thinking about I don't know what movie or quote this is from, but it's the Joker. The Joker says, people in their last moments, they show you who you really are. I feel like everyone's kind of feels like they're witnessing their last moments constantly, and so it's like we're seeing the true side of humanity consistently in different forms. And it's just this hodgepodge of people trying to do the great thing and just get by versus people wanting to get things more for themselves and just doing whatever they have to. And there's nobody's policing. It's just a complete shit show out there. And you never know what someone's going to do. And I think it makes for an slightly unpredictable watch. And as a viewer, I love that. I mentioned last time, about how the razor blades in the boot were it was meant as a symbol for us to question Maximus's morality, something that I think we're going to continue to do. But then I kind of thought maybe it wasn't so much about that. Maybe it's more the blood is gray or something, because there's all a bunch of gray area. No one's good or bad necessarily. But really what I kind of landed on is that I'm so glad that George brought that to the forefront, because it's that something about the razor blades in the boot feels like it should be the cover of this series, because I think that the boot actually represents technology, and the foot represents humanity, and the razor blades represent what humanity does with the technology. And humanity is just such a clusterfuck out there in the wastelands that as long as technology is still being hoarded and possessed and so sought after, that humanity is just going to keep putting its foot in and out of its boot and never fully coming back to any sort of like power, because they're all so obsessed. Took me a while to get there, but it's something around like that. Anyway, that was my kind of.
I like that idea.
That's pretty deep. I just thought the boot was a boot, but you know, that's cool, man. I dig it.
I like that metaphor though.
You're not wrong though. Like that is a great metaphor.
In general, I think this is like a great start to the series, and I think there's a lot to explore. I really enjoyed a lot of like different moments so far in the show, especially with like the cameos and Easter eggs. So many cameos in these last 4 episodes. You get to see Mr. House and Sinclair, who are both pretty big characters in New Vegas. Mr. House, of course, as a spoiler, kind of is in charge of the New Vegas area. And then you see...
Wait. We see Mr. House?
Dude, he's the dude with the mustache at the meeting.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
do you think that he would send anyone other than himself to represent Robco?
Oh my God.
And then you see Sinclair as well. Sinclair is the owner of Big Mountain. He's the big dude at the meeting. And Mr. House makes that slice and says...
These people are all in other games?
They're in New Vegas. They're people who are kind of characters in New Vegas. And Mr. House makes the comment, Sinclair, you would lose money at a casino. And that's because Big Mountain is in charge of the Sierra Madre Casino, which is a DLC in New Vegas.
Oh my God.
So I just thought it was really cool he was in there during the meeting. And then Eric Estrada, like, out of nowhere, Eric, let's go. I totally did not expect that. And then
weird.
Fred Armisen, who you know probably from Saturday Night Live as well as Wednesday. He's also the drummer on Seth Meyers, I think, or he plays an instrument on Seth Meyers. I forgot. He's in the band too as well. So Fred's pretty well known in the industry as well. So him coming in as the radio person was really, I got a chuckle out of that.
Yeah.
So, Dan, Deathclaw.
I mean, we saw a Deathclaw skull. I'll take it. Not a Deathclaw. But
they exist.
They exist. As fans of the games, seeing Norm hacking and getting the guess on a first try without getting any of the parentheses, no tries reset, no dud removed, just gets it in the first try. Like, what? Come on, man. Come on. That's some shit right there.
He has high intelligence, dude.
he has high. He maxed out his skills and
look at the rest of him. Where do you think it all went?
I do want to say that as a fan of the games, seeing this whole thing really play out, this reminded me of The Last of Us, in that we're so used to seeing things from one character's perspective that all of a sudden they're showing the grand scale of everything, like how everything came about. It's awesome to see, like, God, like it's been Vault-Tec this whole time, all the bombs dropping. Like, that's like, I always suspected that, but like, and you probably could find, I don't know, I thought I played a decent amount of hours with both 3 New Vegas.
They never implicitly
and 4.
say it.
You never really find that out, and for that to officially be the thing that happens is like suspicions confirmed and kind of crazy and awesome, and
it all makes sense. Like why there's these experiments. Yeah,
fiduciary responsibility. I thought that was a great thing that was brought up, and that the second that started being explained, it was like, wow, Vault-Tec has every reason to want to destroy the world, because then they'll just be like the most powerful company in the world, and that's essentially what this all boils down to.
And the irony of it is this show airs on Amazon, which if you talk about monopolies and super megacorps, like Amazon's just like, wait a minute. Can you imagine when the owners of the show, of the company, were like, wait a minute, why does this person kind of look like me, like at this meeting? Wait a minute.
Oh my god, that's so true.
So who was
So
the guy? Maybe the owner of Amazon is the guy sitting up there in the booth.
Yeah, that's Jeff Bezos. Is
This
gonna
is Jeff
play the head
Bezos
of
still
Vault-Tec.
there, head of.
That would be amazing.
He should play
that
that
would
guy.
be
That would be
great.
amazing if they could get him to do it, right?
They should. They really should. I have a thing I saw after all this, and I always question the legitimacy of these types of videos, but someone had a video of them playing. I want to say it was 4. When you like the first town you interact with is like, do they call it Nuke Town or something like that? Where it's like there's a
That would be
giant
3, and that
3.
was Megaton.
Megaton. So I played 3. Wow. Okay. I played some of 3 and I remember this, but someone pointed out that if you look at the bomb and like that's in the center of town and like really like get all up in there on it, it's got a Vault-Tec logo on it.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. So like they hinted, super lightly hinted at it because again, this was like 30 FPS game days. But apparently it was on the vault, or it was on the bomb in the center of that town.
I wouldn't be
which
surprised.
theoretically is an indication that
Yeah.
this was
They
happened
never
the whole
implicitly say
time.
it. A lot of it, there's a lot of like terminals and stories that you pick up where it's like, oh, we think the Chinese attack first. But of course, you live in America. You're going to think the Chinese attack. Like,
Yeah.
that's the story you're going to say. You're never going to be like, yeah, we were the
That's
first ones to do
history
it.
you're reading.
Exactly. Like, that's the history you're reading. So, like, a lot of the terminals say that the Chinese dropped the bomb first. But didn't stop the Americans from firing back now, did it? So there you go. I think there's definitely a lot of things that get revealed. And then about predictions and things that you guys were looking forward to, Tim?
I mean, we kind of talked about it. I did want to know. I mean, I kind of had an idea of that this guy was like the head of Vault-Tec, but like you see in the scene that he, oh my God, the scene right before Cooper's wife is talking in the little war room that Vault-Tec has. You see her get like a little blip. At first viewing, I thought it was like her noticing that someone was listening in on a conversation, but I think it was actually because they cut to that window up above everyone of someone, an overseer, if you will, looking literally over everything, and kind of, I think he sent some message to her to then tell her to be like, all right, give him the whole story and talk about the bomb and all that jazz. So
Wow.
I want to know who that really who that plays out to be, and you know, like what role he'll have. I think it is, you know, the Vault-Tec owner, but like, you know, like who it is, like I want to know more about that. That kind of caught me. And then my only other prediction really is that obviously we're going to see New Vegas based on the end scene, but like I think that we're going to see, as Dan was talking about, a bigger picture, and they're going to kind of show us more of either what is currently happening in some of these other vaults that these other companies have owned. Because Vault 4, you know, we see what happened there, how it started off and everything like that. But I predict that we'll kind of have some extra side stories brought in with these other companies' vaults and what experiments were going on in those. Because they did say, you know, like, you know, may the best vault win, essentially. I think that was something like that. So I want to see what happened in those, and I think we're going to see what happened in some of those other vaults, even if it is just little bits. But maybe there's still survivors, and maybe there's a whole nother war that's going to be fought by vault dwellers. So it's a whole boot, razor in the boot situation going on here. So we'll see how that goes.
Like Dan?
I'm just looking forward to finding out. Like, I mean, even if Cooper's daughter's alive, like, she's got to be a ghoul, and if she didn't, there's just a lot of. I gotta admit, I'm a little. You know, Tim always complains about him being jaded about time travel. I'm a little jaded on cryostasis. You know, I feel like I had predicted this like so long ago that I like thought that it was too simple, and then when it actually happened, that's what was happening, I was kind of like, oh, cryostasis. Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't know. So she's in cryo somewhere, or she's a ghoul. It's just like, I don't know. Sure, more people.
Or she's got a super serum that worked and isn't a ghoul.
Doubt it.
Who knows?
It's like, dude, that Thaddeus got a serum that turned him into a ghoul.
I know, which is kind of crazy.
How did Coop become a ghoul? Because the implication I was led under was that radiation and things in the atmosphere turned you into it. You adapted into a ghoul.
Yeah.
But some schmuck-looking motherfucker created something that turned you into a ghoul.
Which is crazy.
So maybe they found that and are tweaking it, and she got basically a super soldier serum, and for lack of a better term, that doesn't have the ghoul side effects. Maybe
Maybe
They
she's not
say
dead.
the word super mutants at some point in this, and super mutants are just roided out ghouls,
Yeah,
basically.
I'm assuming they're like the giant. Yeah.
So
Who knows?
We kind of see one
forward to
actually in the Enclave when they're like wheeling a dead body away. You see some with a gnarled hand. I didn't know if that was a super mutant or not.
I don't
Where?
know either.
When we were in the Enclave in the very beginning with the dog and the scientist, as he was escaping and walking
That's
around
what
with
the
dog.
Enclave is?
That's the
Because
Enclave.
you kept, I heard you guys say that, and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck
It's
an
They really
another
Enclave
brushed
is.
faction.
over it.
It's
That's
another
where
faction.
the guy with the
Yeah,
with
the
thing in
thing,
his
yeah.
The
neck,
guy who
that's where he
discovered
came
Cold
from.
Fusion.
The Enclave is basically the Brotherhood, but just way more secretive and not running around blasting everyone.
Yeah, they are.
Mm.
They come
They're
from
like
the same
scientists?
place. They come from the same place. They're not the scientists per se. They come from the same place. Like the Enclave and the Brotherhood both came from survivors of the American government, but they decided to split for reasons. Without getting into it,
Yeah, it's fine.
my like unanswered questions and kind of is like I want to see more, because it's been implicitly said that the show is in the world of the games, and everything that came before the games is part of the show's history as well. So they're in the same universe and shared universe. So I want to know what the canon ending to all these different games are. Essentially, like every game you play in Fallout, you can choose different type of endings and different factions to side with. In New Vegas, you can pick a certain faction, and in Fallout 4, you can pick a different faction too. So what we've learned is like we've learned different pieces. One of the things that I thought I wanted to learn more about is like obviously what happened with New Vegas and Mr. House and what resulted in that. Why Shady Sands got blown up, because that has a lot to do with the first two Fallouts and also New Vegas as well. So what happened that led to the NCR being blown up? What happened to the Brotherhood out east?
We found out, didn't we? With Shady Sands, at least?
Sort of. But like,
I mean, they
what happened to
told
the
us.
NCR? Like, why
the hell's
did
an
it? Why
NCR?
were they in the position of getting?
You gotta explain that, man. What's an NCR?
No, Tim brings up a good point. They never even explicitly say NCR, but we see
see
an
a
NCR flag.
Yeah,
like in the
and we hear the
background
music.
Oh, New California Republic?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what
Yes,
Shady
you see-
Sands is.
They don't
Yeah.
even say New California Republic once in the show.
No, they only
do
show
they?
the
No,
flag.
they did. They said
They
it. They did say it one time.
Okay.
When she
anyways,
walked into when she was in Vault 4, I think it was written on the board. I thought the voiceover that was happening when she walked into the schoolroom
I don't think
in
they
Vault
did.
4 talked about
it's
the New
fine
California
because
I
Republic.
was
that's
waiting
like-
for them to say it out
I'm not
loud.
gonna we don't need to get into it because it's gonna spoil like most of the game. But yeah, I'm
But
just
I mean,
gonna.
for
You're
the
gonna
moment, we
hear
found
things that you
out
might
what
not
happened.
know if you haven't played the game, which is
That's
like
fine. That's fine.
which is like
But,
what happened with the NCR, like what happened with the Brotherhood out east, like in Fallout 4, because like that ship is distinctly the Perdwin. Like you could see the
Is
name
it?
on the ship. Yeah, you could see the name on the ship.
Oh shit!
So
okay.
what happened with Institute and what happened in out east in Fallout 4? What is the canon ending to that? So like a lot of the show next season, I feel like will confirm what the story or the show creators characterize as the canon ending to those games. That essentially lay the foundations for the history of what happened with the Fallout series, kind of. And then finally is I'm very curious about Steph. The more the second time watching Steph, the more I looked at her and the way she is and the characteristics that she has, the more I think that she's actually Vault Girl. For anybody who doesn't know, we find out that Coop is Vault Boy, like the original guy who they have
Yeah.
as like the icon of the Vault Tech.
Yeah.
But if you didn't
get
know, there's
that.
a female version of him in a lot of the advertisements and a lot of the things in the game. So there's like a Vault Girl who has blonde and has short bobbed hair and who looks like a lot like Steph. you know? And like Steph is obviously, I think we're led to believe that maybe Steph is more of like an admin like Betty, or like somebody who's like, you know, just another junior executive. But I think there's more to Steph's story actually than meets the eye. I think she might be the original Vault Girl. I think she might even know who is in charge and who's in the booth. Like maybe that's his wife or his girlfriend or something like that. And like she's like also a Hollywood actress or something along those lines. There's more to Steph's story, I think, that needs to be explored. And I highly suspect she might be Vault Girl.
I'm
and that's it. Those are my thoughts. And what we kind of talked about. Any last general thoughts or feelings before we end it?
I will say this. They did a damn good piece of writing for sure on this show. And in the ending, when what's his name is monologuing to Lucy, her dad, he's explaining the whole thing, and when you hear the words, he's not wrong, but he says it's questionable, but he says, like, you know, look at what's happened on the surface. You see all these different factions, you see all that it leads to is them fighting and blood and death and more violence. And how do you get, you know, fix violence and all of this killing is get rid of the factions. And to hearing about what you were just talking about, which was like a billion little tiny facts in my head at one moment, because this was all game related stuff that you were talking about, but like all these different factions essentially, and even the Brotherhood itself has has an Eastern faction apparently that you say, and then the Enclave and the Brotherhood used to be another, you know, whatever faction altogether. And like, so her dad's technically not wrong. Vault-Tec in this instance sort of is not wrong. They're morally horrible for doing what they did, but like he's sort of right. Like the only way to create peace in this situation, true peace, is to kill everybody, get rid of them all, and start over. It's horrible. It is horrible, and I do not agree with that, because I believe, you know, humans have the right to be free and make their own choices. But like, you can kind of, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, the writing is good. You can see the motivation behind some of these characters and how they believe a lot of things are right. Because again, it's like the Thanos thing where like he's not wrong. He's just a piece of shit about it. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of, they did a great job, really, for me, bringing this whole thing around in that last episode with really kind of tying the story up. Some of it, you know, up. Obviously, there's a lot that has to be answered in the future, but damn
I think he's also right.
Writing
he's also right, because like Moldiver isn't like completely like,
oh yeah, no, they're the same
guilt
person.
free. Like she hired some raiders from the looks of it to go raid the vaults, so like to get revenge on Hank. So like she's no better. She slaughtered a bunch of people in the vault who had nothing to do with Hank. There's two solutions. Yeah. And what do humans do? They fight about it. Yeah, you're totally right. And that's what Maximus said too. Like, everybody wants to do right, but we just don't agree on how to get there, you know? And that's just how it is. War never changes. Yep. Never changes. So that's a good way to leave it. This was a long one. This is a great show. I want more. I want it right now. And I want answers, damn it. But it's good. They have officially, as of today, been picked up for a season 2, or as of time of recording. Let me say that so it's not confusing. It'd been picked up for a season 2, so we have that to look forward to in the future. And yeah, we always want to hear your opinions. Do you agree with us? Do you have more to say? Is there something we forgot to talk about that you thought was important? Let us know in the comments. Hit up the socials. Let me know. I will talk to y'all as much as humanly possible. Check out, again, we're going to have one last Fallout episode, and it will be with a special guest talking about some of the behind the scenes stuff to a degree. I don't know how much he can say, but we're going to be talking to him and getting all the little details we possibly can out of him. As always, if you've had a good time, we have been The Modern Nerd, and thank you for watching.